Hi, welcome to the bathtub. You know me, it's the old masturbator, Scott Bradfield. And I don't know, it's kind of gone away. I had a Raphael glow in the video I just did about a few minutes ago. It's coming and going over the Irish Hills. We call them the Irish Hills out here in South Obispo, and the sun comes through them and the light comes on. I just look beatific. I'm not beatific. I'm not beatific at all. But I look at that sometimes on this, just because of the light. Anyway, today we're going to talk briefly as possible. I always think these things should be short so that they're not mistaken for reviews or analyses of these books. They're just my readerly pleasures or not from books. And I just finished reading, I finished it a few days ago, and I always want to do these quickly because Henry James is hard to remember. His stuff is so weird. I'll try to describe that in a minute. The Princess Casamassima. That's probably a Henry James most people don't know. Even a lot of fans, most people know Portrait of a Lady and Wings of a Dove. The Princess Casamassima was written shortly after Portrait of a Lady. It was published in 1886. I have a pretty beat up old copy because my doctoral professor, who was really a great good doctoral professor, and he's a good friend. I like him a lot. There's two things I almost never forgave him for. One is he got me to write a chapter of my dissertation about James Fenimore Cooper. John Rowe, this is for you. And it took me years to kind of overcome that and to forgive him for that idea, because it did make a good chapter for my dissertation. It would sort of fit. But I can't read. I find him kind of unbearable. And John's a big fan of Henry James. Has written a lot of books about him. And he put this on my list. And I remember reading it. And I remember not enjoying it. And it's filled with notes. And I didn't remember a damn word from this book. I read it again. I found all my notes in it, underlined passages. And I didn't remember any of this book. It's a pretty interesting book. And it's the closest to a political novel for Henry James, who really mainly talks about people wandering through each other's houses and appreciating their decor. Pure mountain water. You can appreciate the decor of our Jamesian mansion right behind me. And I'm going to give you a quick summary of it. It's the central character is a guy named Hyacinth Robinson. And rereading it this time, I just completely was absorbed in it. I really enjoyed it this time. I can't say I'd give it a hell yeah yet. I don't know if I'm at the point. I can give it a yeah for classical gas as opposed to a nay. There were passages where I kind of got absorbed, and parts where I got kind of bored, and other parts where I get kind of confused. I get a little lost because these paragraphs, James writes these paragraphs, 2-3 page long paragraphs, where you're not really, he explains all the different things different people are thinking in the room and who remembers hearing this from that person and this and what they're looking at in the walls. And also mainly what their explanations of what they're thinking, analysis. It's kind of hard to explain unless you read them, and it's very hard to follow some of those paragraphs. Anyway, Hyacinth Robinson sounds like an Oscar Wildean sort of character, but 1866, so that doesn't quite fit. There's a 1886. I take that back. So there is an Oscar Wildean possibility here. His name's Hyacinth Robinson. At the beginning of the book, he's being raised by a woman in a poor part of London. I forget where they're located. Holborn, somewhere in that area in the late 19th century. And she's a seamstress and basically fixes people's clothes, I think. And it turns out that Hyacinth is the son of a woman who's in prison for murdering her lover. I don't think it's her husband, her lover. And the father was supposed to be some sort of aristocratic character. So Hyacinth comes from this mixed family where the mother's French and she's in prison and she's dying. And in the opening of the book, the seamstress does not want him to know about his parents because he thinks it'll destroy him. And maybe it does. He goes to prison and visits his mother, like Holloway. It's almost like Holloway prison. And meets her, and it's quite traumatic for him. And then he grows up, and he becomes sort of attracted to the social movements of the time, and anarchists and socialists, and the idea that he wants to kind of bring worker utopia to the world, and yet he doesn't quite follow it to a large extent. That's the best I can say about it. Anyway, at the beginning of the novel, he gets in with a kind of weird group of people, particularly a young man and his sister, the Muniments, and he meets them, and he becomes enamored of them, and that attraction between people, particularly young men, for one another in James, and his relationship with his stepmother or his adopted mother. And there's another man, Mr. Vetch, who plays, I think he plays the fiddle in like stage musicals or something like that, or music halls. And they all care about this boy, and he gets drawn into the intrigue. It reminds me a lot of Joseph Conrad's The Secret Agent, about this one guy who gets roped into to killing somebody and setting off a bomb. And they rope in Hyacinth, and he agrees to commit a murder. It's kind of kept very vague in a way, but what he's going to do, but there's some sort of German political figure who's come into London. He's trying to they're controlling this kid and watching him and following him around to make sure he'll do what he does. He gets involved with this woman called the Princess Casamassima, who's a well-off woman who's left her husband and living off his money, and she goes through different. She's clearly a character that James doesn't really like, even though she's quite an enchanting and quite absorbing character. He doesn't quite like her. She's always going from different movements to other movements, and now she's a socialist, and she becomes involved with Hyacinth, and he comes to stay with her for a while, and she gets involved with his movement. I don't want to say much more than that, except that I really found it kind of absorbing. I found the last 100 pages were pretty suspenseful, wondering what the heck this kid was going to do, and it's very much a tragic novel, and the idea, and while James is sort of tries to give a sense of sympathy for the workers' movements and for the unequal conditions of London, he has no sympathy for the political movement at all, and it resolves itself clearly that James is not in support of these types of movements. Anyway, I still found it enjoyable. I want to read two quick passages. One is from the preface. So James is famous for writing these prefaces of all his old novels later. I just want to say a little brief part, because I find the characters wandering through London the most enchanting part of James, since I love London, and in a way it's kind of like, it makes me a little homesick, or it reacquaints me with the love I have for London. Very briefly, here's how James was inspired to write this novel. He says, "It is a fact that, as I look back, the attentive exploration of London, the assault directly made by the great city upon an imagination quick to react, fully explains a large part of it," to make the writing of this book. "There is a minor element that refers itself to another source, of which I shall presently speak, but the prime idea was unmistakably the ripe, round fruit of perambulation. One walked, of course, with one's eyes greatly open, and I hasten to declare that such a practice, carried on for a long time and over a considerable space, positively provokes all round a mystic solicitation, the urgent appeal on the part of everything to be interpreted and, so far as may be, reproduced." I like that, because I just remember how all the times I used to walk through London, and it was a wonderful way to write. It would really inspire you to come up with stories and sentences and ideas. This is a little brief bit near about two-thirds of the way through the book, where Princess Casamassima, one of the characters she meets, is a fairly well-off young woman who is sympathetic to the poor and is helping a young girl who's sick and in bed all the time. Lady Aurora, I think her name is. And all the different characters at some time meet each other and have long, long conversations. And this is Princess Casamassima giving her reasoning for supporting these kind of radical revolutionaries. "Possibly you don't know that I'm one of those who believe that a great New Deal is destined to take place, and it can't make things worse than they already are." So the best thing you can say about the revolution is it won't make things any worse. "I believe, in a word, in the action of the people for themselves. The others will never act for them, and I'm all ready to act with them, if in any intelligent or intelligible way. If that shocks you, I shall be immensely disappointed, because there's something in the impression you make on me, and the impression that people make on one another is all about what his books are about, how they perceive one another and how they get made to feel by other people. If that shocks you, I shall be immensely disappointed, because there's something in the impression you make on me that seems to suggest you haven't the usual prejudices, so that if certain things were to happen, you wouldn't be afraid. You're beautifully shy, are you not? But you're not craven. I suppose that if you thought the inequalities and oppressions and miseries now universal were a necessary part of life and were going on forever, you wouldn't be interested in those people over the river. The bedridden girl and her brother, I mean. That's the Muniments. Because Mr. Robinson tells me they're advanced socialists. Or at least the brother is. Perhaps you'll say you don't care for him, the sister to your mind being the remarkable one. She's indeed a perfect little femme de monde. She talks so much better than most of the people in society. I hope you don't mind my saying that, because I have an idea you're not in society. You can imagine whether I am. Haven't you judged it like me, condemned it, and given it up, the social world of London? Aren't you sick of the egotism, the snobbery, the meanness, the frivolity, the immorality, the hypocrisy? And this is kind of explaining why Princess Casamassima is sympathetic to the socialist revolutionaries and at the same time is both seducing the Hyacinth to commit this horrible act and at the same time wanting to protect him. And what she ends up doing is worth finding out. Anyway, I really enjoyed it this time. I'm going to give James some more time. I think you do have to have you got to have a lot of time in the bathtub. You got to be able to turn off the news. It's good on a holiday when I couldn't read the news as much as I normally would. And I found something quite soothing about the way James writes. He can be kind of exasperating at the same time. Okay, so yeah, nay. This is definitely a yeah. It's verging on a hell yeah. I'm still he's a little too airy for me. Okay.